Zen fam, I've been thinking. I've been thinking about console generations, past, present, and future. You see, we've had some things in the past where they've seemed amazing, they were filled with possibilities, but yet they didn't make it to the end. Or they were only appreciated after their lifespan. I mean, one could consider the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast, brilliant system. The little UMD thingy in the not UMD, the little unit inside the controller that could mimic the game data of other players, that held saves, could do own little games in itself you could take with you. You could move your saves from system to system. Your friend could upload your save data and play against you even if you weren't there because it'd be a ghost of how you normally play. Brilliant. The first system to truly be online. Yes. We could say about how the PS2 had that little online unit you could snap on, but it was only available in North America and for Final Fantasy, blah blah blah. But when you get right down to brass tacks, it was the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was a brilliant system. Yeah, its controller was a little weird, but it was actually quite a comfortable controller. I know, I've used it. And Sega basically made a mess of it, because that was how Sega was then. Sega kind of got a bit big for its britches, and it made a lot of mistakes, and it shifted around too quickly, and it didn't have enough confidence in its own platforms and its own ability for its own studios. And Sega basically now is just a maker of games rather than just a maker of systems and games, and they still do some arcade work. So I don't think we'll ever see another Sega system ever again. But we're talking about a company that at one point was the primary maker of game systems for in-flight entertainment. I mean, there's a network sector you never normally hear about. So Sega used to be a big concern. I mean, Sega used to be the original console war. It was Sega and Nintendo. And now it's like maybe Nintendo and Sony. It's pretty much not really Xbox anymore. Xbox is, shall we say, having difficulties at the minute. It might spring back, but I don't see it, which is a shame, because there always needs to be another big company next to the other big company so they keep each other in check. And so development gets further. And part of the reason why I think that the PlayStation Pro is so expensive is because there isn't an Xbox Pro. There's no Series Pro. If there was a Series Pro, you best believe that PlayStation 5 Pro would be easily £100 cheaper. But that's just my own personal. Back to the original topic. In fact, if you staying with Sony even, look at the PSP you saw in the thumbnail to this video. The PSP was an incredible bit of kit. Its little discs, those UMDs, they were awesome. That's why I said UMD before, because I was kind of thinking of the PSP as I was having the stream of consciousness, as I want to do. But yeah, great little format, and good lots of memory, online connectability, multimedia. You could stick MP3s in it, and once you had that system jailbroken, my god, you could play almost anything on it. The controls were solid, it was a rugged little machine, it had a brilliant battery, the screen quality for the time, wow. And yet, the Sony just sort of let it go by the wayside, for reasons best known to Sony. Or you can even talk about the Vita, its successor. A story of even more epic proportions of its capabilities, but even more epic so in Sony's inability to understand what they've got when they've got it. I mean, the Vita could do everything the PSP could do, but more. It had better web surfing, it had better abilities, it had the touchpad on the back, it could use the camera, both front and back, to do AR gaming. It had incredible controls. It had a really wonderful screen, especially if you had the OLED like I did, which was wonderful. It came in originally two models, so you could have either a Wi-Fi version or a Wi-Fi and cellular compatible version, which meant if you wanted to, you could stick a mobile phone SIM card in the back of that puppy and have internet anywhere. You didn't have to rely on a Wi-Fi signal. If you were prepared to pay the money and pay that bill, then you could have internet for your PlayStation Vita anywhere you were. It took up the PlayStation trophy system. It had its own trophy store. It had its own game store. It had its own games. I mean, the Vita really truly was something very, very special. It felt really nice in the hand. Of course, what fumbled the Vita, as I've spoken about many years ago on this channel, was 1, its proprietary cabling, 2, its proprietary memory. I mean, when you're charging 3 times the natural price for SD memory, only because you've put it in a different case, so that only it can be read in that machine and nothing else will go in that machine, then you're causing a problem for the consumer. And of course, yes, okay, when the Vita first came out, it was hideously expensive. That's why I got mine second hand. But the sound was good, the headphone port was good, everything about the Vita, once you got past the price, and if you could get past the whole thing with the memory cards, was brilliant. But, alas, Sony, yet again, fumbled. And there have been loads of systems, inside and outside of gaming, which have started with incredible potential, but that potential has then been squandered. And it's a headache to see the very least. Which leads me to wonder about the aforementioned PlayStation 5 Pro. As the weeks have gone on since we saw the 700 quid price tag, we have seen eked out more and more stories and more videos about things that the PlayStation 5 Pro will be able to do for the video games that are adapted for it. Not only that, but to mention the fact that it's going to be more dev friendly to the point where even small studios will have access to it to update their games to make them PlayStation 5 compatible and play better and look better at the same time. Now, I'm not saying that this makes the PlayStation 5 Pro's price tag more palatable, but I am saying it does make it a bit more understandable. There's a difference there. So if the PlayStation 5 Pro is doing that now before it's on sale, and these are the things we're learning about it as we currently stand here now in October 2024, what will be the state of the PlayStation 5 Pro this time next year, when it's been out for about a year or so, and the devs have basically begun to really understand its power and really been able to push it. Not to mention, if all things hold true, then by this point next year, Grand Theft Auto 6 will be out, and Grand Theft Auto 6 on a PlayStation 5 Pro is very likely to be something quite special, if indeed they've actually done their job with Grand Theft Auto 6 and it looks and plays and operates the way that we all hope that it does. So we have to wonder, will the PlayStation 5 Pro get to reach its full potential, or will it only be on the market long enough just for PlayStation 6 to come along and outshine it, and nobody buys a PlayStation 5 Pro apart from a few of those whales that have gone out and bought the Pro, or some of those lucky whales that have been able to get their hands on a PlayStation 5 Pro 30-year anniversary edition PlayStation model. That's a big sentence. So I find this all to be an interesting discussional topic. Where will the PlayStation 5 Pro end up at the end game? Say 2 years down the line, when the PlayStation is probably going to start talking more about a PlayStation 6, which is apparently already doing dev work for, which is not really a surprise. I mean, it's basically the case with any company that once they've released one product, they've already started, not starting, but have started on the next product. It's just how it goes, especially in technological, electrical items. You really think that, like, when Apple puts out, like, the iPhone 16, that they're not already beavering away on the iPhone 17? Nah. That is always, the hamster wheel is always turning for technology companies. Always turning. So, we'll have to see what happens with the PlayStation 5 Pro in the last 2-3 years lifespan before we get the next turnover. But then the next turnover is going to be impacted by what happens with the PlayStation 5 and its Pro companion. I mean, when you think about it this way, right? We're coming up on 4 years. 4 years of the PlayStation 5. Yet, we are still getting a very high percentage of games coming out that are for the PlayStation 5 but have a PlayStation 4 compatible version. Now yes, Sony always promises and has held the promise that, like, if you're a PlayStation gamer, you don't get your current system doesn't immediately get cut off. You get a couple of years grace period when there's still some games, but then as time goes by, less and less of the games come out for both systems, and they naturally end the lifespan of the previous generation. That more or less hasn't happened this generation of PlayStation 5. Because, realistically speaking, they're not really that much better, the games. Yeah, okay, we could do ray tracing like effects on the PlayStation 5, and we've got loading times, and there's all kinds of extra little bits and pieces, bells and whistles. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of games on PlayStation 4 that still, today, in 2024, look really, really nice and still completely hold up. And there's a lot of people out there who go, I can't afford a PlayStation 5. In fact, there's still people now who want to get a PlayStation 5 at launch, and now they can get a PlayStation 5, but with the PlayStation 5 Pro coming out, they know that there's a PlayStation 6 just a couple of years down the road, and they're like going, do I want to spend 500 quid on a new system that in 2 to 3 years will be surpassed? I may as well stick with my PlayStation 4 because games are still coming out for it. I'll get the PlayStation 6 because chances are that the PlayStation 5 games will probably work on it. And if they don't, then hey, they don't. And if I've got a PC or I've got a Steam Deck, then chances are those games will come to PC, and I'll play them on a Steam Deck or play them on a PC, and I'll play the new stuff on a PlayStation 6 when that eventually comes out. So Sony's kind of kicked itself in the butt here by letting the PlayStation 4 live so long because of their adherence to their earlier promise, and also because the PlayStation 5 had its problems coming out because of supply chain shortages due to the big P. You know, the C-bomb hit us, and it changed everything. I mean, it changed how YouTubers talk to you. Most of us won't say the name of the thing that put us all indoors because we're still afraid that if we mention it, we'll get a content strike. We'll still get a slap on the wrist from YouTube. We're still dancing around that term. Admittedly, there's a couple of YouTubers who just don't give a hoot and just go for it anyway, but there's a good amount of us out here who were still walking on SLs, being super, super careful. But here's the thing. We have to learn, companies have to learn from their mistakes. And it seems this generation that Sony doesn't seem to learn from the mistakes. It doesn't learn from its previous successes. It learned the successes and the failures of PlayStation 3, and it made some great advances with PlayStation 4. PlayStation 4 was a barnstormer. It flattened the Xbox One. It outsold it like, I think it was like 5-1 or something. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but it sold almost as much as the PS2. The PS2, the biggest selling games console of all time. I mean, the only thing that even gets close to that is the Wii. And the Wii got that high up because everybody bought it, including people's grannies who wanted to play bowling in the lounge. Amazing, but the PS2 obviously got there because it was the world's cheapest DVD player. And people go, hey, we can buy this DVD player and it's a game system. So we have to ask the question, when PlayStation 6 eventually turns up, what will it learn from the previous generations of PlayStation? And what will it be able to do for the customer, for the gamer, for you and for me when it comes out? What will be different? What will set it apart? What will actually make it a new generation, a new vista, a new paradigm in gaming? Because we've reached a point with graphics where they look really, really nice. We've reached a point with lighting where it looks really, really nice. And if you have the money to spend, you can really just stretch things out and out and out and out in the features of sound, in the features of graphical presentation, of frame rate, of stability. So systems can get better and better and better at doing all the small stuff and making games more immersive. But how do you basically leverage that nicerness into something that the average everyday workaday person out there in the real world will go, yeah, that's dropping several hundred quid's worth of it. That's what you've got to do, Sony. You've got to find a way of marketing a plus 500 quid machine to the consumer. In a time when, like, we might very well, next generation, not have physical discs, although I will bemoan that, and if there's a physical edition, I will buy the physical edition because I like my discs, I like my real games. But there's a lot of food for thought here that I'm obviously encouraging you to all get dancey with your fingers on those keyboards. I want to know what you guys think, where you guys are laying, where you guys are going like, yeah, I want a PlayStation 6 and here's what I want it to do. And let's leave aside the whole thing of exclusives and of shiny graphics. What do we actually want the system to do to make gaming better? Are we talking about haptics? Are we talking about controllers that have other forms of gamer interaction, such as heat, or changing the actual texture of the controller? But there have been patents for that, although I don't see that truly working. Are we talking about lighting that changes, you have lighting rigs that have Wi-Fi to the system that you put in your room that change the lighting of the room as you play, but then you'd only get limited use out of that because most of us gamers, like me, I have a family. And having lights in the room that change the room, yeah, I don't see me getting to do that. And generally speaking, when you have a setup like that, it means changing parts of the room. And I think my wife would probably have words if I start changing the layout of the lounge just so I can put up some fancy lights and make colours go interestingness when I'm playing video games for the small amount of time I get to play them. And such a ring would obviously bring up the price of the system. Well, I mean, yes, you could sell them separately, but then you've reached the point where you end up creating a schism of gamers. You have the gamers who have the lights and the gamers who don't have the lights. Do you reintroduce VR again? Do you try and make a PlayStation VR 3 that's completely wireless and is even slimmer and has less technical drawbacks? Probably not. I think Sony have abandoned PSVR 2, to be honest with you. There's a few titles yet to come out, but I think most of the titles that are coming out, that's it. Probably another year or two. I think PSVR 2 will just be a dust gatherer, which is a crying shame because it is wonderful technology. I know, I've used it, it's fantastic, but quite frankly, I just don't think that Sony's actually making use of it. And there we go again, where companies make things but don't make use of the advantages, the possibilities that the equipment provides. I mean, when PSVR first came out, they were really actually trying to do stuff with it. I mean, they brought back the Move controllers, and like, you know, they brought out the aim controller, which was actually quite good. And for a while, they were trying to do stuff with PSVR, and then they just sort of like didn't. And then after they stopped trying with PSVR, a couple of years later, they brought out PSVR 2, and for the first wee while, they seem to be trying. I mean, the controllers for PSVR 2, the Sense controllers, are incredible. I mean, there's a real visceral link you feel when you have those on your hands and you're playing a game. I mean, I played my Horizon Call of the Mountain at my mate Dave's house, and when you're climbing and you're actually doing a climbing motion and you're actually gripping for stuff and you're opening your hand and your hand opens and your hand shuts the same way that you're shutting your hand because the sensors are that good. And there's all that wasted technology, all that wasted potential. And the rumble in the headset, that's basically haptic rumble, it's not just rumble. And me with my cold here, rapidly losing my voice. Yeah. So not only do Sony need to learn examples from what they've made before, but they also need to learn how to use the potential of the technology they create. And by using that knowledge from both those spheres, they need to be able to combine that with the means to actually market properly why we should buy a PlayStation 6. And I don't just mean guys like you and me. We're bought in. I know that I want a PlayStation 6. I've not even seen it. I don't even know what the games are. I know I want it because I love gaming. And PlayStation is my preferred platform. But for Joe Bloggs down the road, who likes to play some video games every once in a while, how are you going to sell a 500-600 quid game system to him? That's the big question. Maybe you have the answers, and if you do, then hashtag support Scottish YouTubers, and of course, as always, aye, nae bother.